The primary purpose of Innovative AAC Solutions, the podcast, is to educate and inform. The views expressed during all episodes are solely those of the individuals involved and do not constitute educational or medical advice. They are not necessarily the views of Special School District of St. Louis County.
Hey, Laura, how are you?
Hi, Cheryl.
It's good to see you. I think as far as school year goes, we've been busy, haven't we, dear?
And then some. As you well know, I have very little sleep these days with 7-month-old sleep regression.
And I can't even blame a baby. I'm not on top of my game, and I have nothing to do with my sleep patterns. It's just the fact that we're busy, but we're busy finding all kinds of cool things for you guys. And I'm hoping that we're making life easier because of that. So welcome
back to Innovative AAC Solutions. I think we have some new fun finds for everybody this week, right?
We do. I want to start because I'm excited. Some people may already be using this, but it's Epic Books. But every time I look at it, I'm like, there's a lot of cool stuff here that I want to make sure everybody knows about it. So that's the reason I chose it for my fun find. So I'm going to share my screen. And if you don't already know about it, it is free for educators. And I haven't dug into the details as far as how long it's been around or how long it's been free, but I know we talked about it a lot last year because of the, just people being virtual. It was a good thing, but it's a good thing for all kinds of reasons right now. And again, if you're not familiar, I just went in and I signed in with my SSD Google account. So that's a quick, easy way to take advantage of it. But then I just want you to explore. There are tons and tons and tons of options as far as not only the kinds of books, but the way the books are presented. So that's what I want to kind of talk about today. Everything, kid-wise that you could probably imagine, age-wise, all kinds of cool stuff. But, because we are a podcast and because I do listen to a lot of podcasts, I just the other day clicked on audiobooks. I do that for myself. I check out audiobooks from the St. Louis County Library just to help, just pass the time. And, when I'm outside working in the yard and things like that, I really do enjoy audiobooks. So I just kind of looked at this and went, we've got a lot of our students that auditory input is their strength. Maybe vision doesn't support them well, but their auditory is. So I was thinking about the fact that we could make this so much easier for them to just sit back and listen to a book when they have some downtime. We are very computer oriented, it kind of comes along with being under the umbrella of assistive technology. But I think sometimes, again, it could be simple to just have a book on any kind of player, whatever is available to the classroom staff or to a parent, and let that student just listen. They don't have to be what am I trying to say? Somehow there's a connection to a computer and there's internet and you could download one of these books and they could just listen. So when you click on that, then it still is asking you, well, what age level do you want? What topics do you want? You still have lots and lots of different things to choose from. But like this book, I Love You, Stinky Face.
Well, I Miss You, Stinky Face. I Love You, Stinky Face is the original, which is one of my toddler's top 10 books for sure.
That's what we had was I Love You, Stinky Face. I don't think I've read I Miss You, Stinky Face.
I feel like I need that one in my life. I might have to download that audiobook today for Wesley.
Yeah. So again, it's just another way to take advantage of this site. Of course, we know that they've got Read to Me books and they've got the AR books. And it's just, I am so impressed with the volume of resources they offer. And I want to make sure people know. So if you haven't been, please try it. If you already knew about it, my question is, could you crank it up and use it more often? Could you use it in different ways?
Yeah, or just share it, and knowing it's a free resource, share it with someone else that you think might benefit. I really like the fact that you can search by keyword, because we know that some of our students have particular interests, and whether that be Sesame Street or animals or race cars.
Halloween-wise, right now, you just search Halloween, and it came up with, I did that a minute ago, and it came up with all kinds of different, but yeah, you're right. So the idea that passions that we know our students have, you could, in fact,
And there's
I know one
fiction
of your
and
passions is
nonfiction.
Bluey.
So,
Is Bluey in here yet?
oh, let's see.
I'm
Oh,
sorry.
not yet.
Thank you.
It hasn't crossed the pond yet.
Yeah.
That's okay. Well, I love this, Cheryl.
Right.
Thank you for sharing, because I think this is one that we sometimes forget about, and it's a really great resource.
Yeah. And again, it's just something that I want to make sure, every once in a while you just jog that memory a little bit and see what happens.
Well, you mentioned Halloween, so let me take that as a jumping point, because my fun find is related to Halloween as well. I'm really into, again, with the toddler at home, I've been really into sensory play lately. And so my fun find is one that crosses all ages, and to the point where I was like, oh, I think this would be a really fun activity as well. So Speech Without Limits is an Instagram account, and they are always sharing really great ideas and thematic units. Well, this week they shared Erupting Pumpkin Cauldron, which entails basically an erupting pumpkin that kind of makes it look like witch's brew. But it'd be a great science experiment or just a really fun kind of hands-on thematic activity. It's very simple. You just you get a pumpkin, you carve it out, you clean it out, which that could be a fun activity in of itself.
That's a sensory thing too, yeah.
Yeah, you get some black paint, vinegar, baking soda, and green food coloring, and you basically put it all together. But the thing I like about Speech Without Limits is they also then have targets to explore with core words and vocabulary. So I will share that as a link in the episode notes, but definitely check that out. I cannot wait to do it with Leslie.
Yeah. And like I said, this is, we're kind of towards the middle of October. You can do it a few times before Halloween gets here.
Yeah, 100%. And again, anything with witches, like pick up Room on a Broom. She has that in the story. It can be a whole thematic unit. It could be really, really fun. And I would love it. So I know our teenagers and people looking for stuff for older students, which we don't always talk about as much.
Yeah, that sounds like fun, Laura. That'll be a good one.
I think so. And, the other thing you talk about, kind of things that are in the cauldron bubbling. I have another fun find is just the fact that we have so many resources that I think people don't know about, including one of my PT friends, Kristen Driskill. She is a wonderful asset to any team, and she is down in Mehlville these days. And I got the chance to sit down with her to talk about positioning in AAC. And it was just a great interview. She is a wealth of knowledge, and I can't wait to share it with you.
That sounds like all of us are going to benefit from listening to them. Again, just awareness-wise, I need to know more.
Yeah. So sit back and listen to this interview with Kristen Driskill. Okay, welcome back to Innovative AAC Solutions. We are in the middle of our season, and I have the amazing, wonderful Kristen Driskill here today. Hi, Kristen.
Hello.
So I've known you now for about 5 years, maybe a little more?
I think so, yes.
Well, so for our listeners who don't know you, can you just give a little background, introduce yourself, tell us where you were and where you're at now?
Sure. So overall, I've been a PT for 18 years, and the past 15 years, I've been with Special School District. When I first started, I started in the Hazelwood schools and worked there for 3 years, and I've been covering schools down south since then. Before that, I worked in outpatient orthopedics for a few years, and then when I first graduated, I worked in acute care at Barnes Jewish, actually.
Man, so like the whole
The whole realm, yeah.
It sounds similar to mine. That's so funny. I always tell people every time I have somebody on, I learn something new about them.
Yeah.
It never fails. So you talked a little bit about kind of like your journey. What has that looked like in regards to AAC? Has there been what's your experience been like, and has it evolved? Is it the same? What does that look like?
It has definitely evolved over the years. I've had the privilege of working with a lot of different types of students, and many of those have had physical needs. There was several years in a row where we had one classroom that supported students with multiple disabilities, and there were multiple students in that classroom that had similar needs. So I was able to spend a good amount of time in that room working together with the team and just learning a lot more about their AUGCOM needs and how to support those needs from a PT standpoint.
So let's dive into that. Let's talk about what, from a PT standpoint in the world of access, what does that look like for somebody with a complex body and with multiple disabilities?
Well, I think positioning is key. So making sure that you get the student set in a good position. And, it also depends on what their access point is for whatever device they're using, whether it be their head or their upper extremities. So I guess a lot of kind of planning goes into that process and determining what is the best setup. And it needs to be very individualized for each student.
So what about, like, I know we talk about AAC and like the equipment setup, but why would someone need to care about positioning like on a bigger scale? What's important about that we would want to really hone in on? Is it just that they need to be able to see a device, or they need to be able to see the classroom?
That's definitely one point. So their visual field, depending upon how they're positioned, sometimes wheelchairs can tilt backwards, and a lot of times we use that feature when students have poor head control, but unfortunately that does alter their visual field and what they're able to attend to in the classroom. So that's definitely one big part of it. Another part is proximal stabilization. So making sure the pelvis is stabilized, the trunk is stabilized, that will increase their success with using their head or their hands or their arms to access and activate their devices. Also, from what I've learned over the years with attending courses and things that involve this, it also impacts their active learning and their active attention. So when they are in a very passive position, they kind of check out and they're not really paying as much attention. Whereas if they're up and positioned well over their pelvis and their muscles are engaged, then they can better use their cognition also to attend to what it is that they need to be doing in the classroom. Endurance is another big thing with positioning, making sure they're well supported, that they're not going to fatigue easily over time. Comfort, making sure they're comfortable in whatever position they're in, and that they have that their range of motion and access to the ability to reach their devices has been taken into consideration. The other thing that I thought of is muscle tone. Positioning can very much affect muscle tone. So it can increase it, or it can sometimes help kind of tone down that muscle tone. So the positioning can affect that. And then the other thing that I think is important to consider when you're looking long-term at a student and their access is their condition going to be one that is going to include decline or progression, and what might that look like, and how could that kind of evolve over time with them and any changes that they might have.
So one thing a listener might wonder is, we talked about proper positioning and what that looks like, but we also know that our kiddos with complex bodies are in a lot of different pieces of equipment. Why?
Yes.
First of all, why do we even do that? What is the importance of that? And then can you talk a little bit to, how that changes all of those things that we just talked about, right? Like the attention
Right.
and the learning and,
Right.
the medical piece of that.
Right. Absolutely. So the change in position is important throughout the day. I don't think any of us would want to be stuck in the same position all day long. We like to get up, we like to move around, stretch our legs, even just shift a little bit in the chair that we're sitting in, if we're sitting for a long extended period of time. So just allowing those students to have those abilities to stretch and change position, relieve pressure. If they're sitting in one position for a long time and they're really got a spot that's got a lot of pressure, an opportunity to relieve that and have some a better position to not produce so much pressure in one spot. Just in terms of, you talked about the medical piece too, it helps with breathing and circulation, and that all plays a part into just their overall attention. And so changes in position for all of those reasons can affect their just their level of alertness, help them wake up a little bit and kind of restart their system. I'm trying to think in terms of the other things that you asked. You know, we like to give students opportunities to weight bear if they are not students who can ambulate and weight bear and stand on their own. That has a lot of medical benefits for them, but also the different positions can also challenge their head and trunk in different ways. And so a lot of times when you get them on the floor or in a different type of chair or in a stander, they have those opportunities built into their day to maintain or even increase the strength that they need to be able to use their head and their trunk, to be able to do those sorts of things with their devices throughout their school day, to be an active participant in their education.
And in the simplest terms, like as a mom, when I watch my 7-month-old now, I can't believe she's 7 months, but when I watch my 7-month-old, she learns, like even cognition, like you learn through gravity, through movement, through balance. And so
absolutely,
I feel like the students are the same way.
Yes. And sometimes that's even a therapeutic approach, you know, even students who may not necessarily be a candidate for maybe a power chair, independent use, or even gait trainer, they may not be using it, you know, functionally to move about the building. Sometimes those opportunities just to be independent explorers within their environment can lead to a lot of learning in and of itself. And that's exactly right. That's how babies learn a lot, is just by exploring their environment, having those new sensory experiences, just getting a different viewpoint, being able to be places where you just see movement, things going on in front of you. A lot of that just leads to overall processing and, you know, development and learning.
And you also, I think it's really important that you hit on the fact of just, you know, being restrained and not that whole feeling of just being in one spot for too long. We just a couple of days ago did switch class, and we allow the participants to, in a very healthy, structured way, we allow their teams to kind of restrain them and tape them to a chair so they can feel like what our students can feel when they have chest harnesses on, when they're completely strapped in, when they have the wedges and they are positioned in one way and then they're positioned in another way, and just talking about those differences. So I think that's super important. Don't go back and restrain your team members, but make sure that you're thinking about how often do I shift, and how often, like, do I always sit back? Like, how many of us sit back in a 90-degree angle and put our pelvis back all the way? We don't sit like that all day. It's not comfortable, and we need to offer the same opportunities and thought process for our students too.
And I think it kind of goes along with access too. I have students who may need that chest harness support, you know, when they're at rest or not actively, but if involved in anything, but if someone's sitting by them and they're working on, you know, accessing a device, sometimes it might be beneficial to remove some of that to give them a little bit more freedom of movement. You know, some of these kids need to kind of incorporate their trunk into their movements in order to get a better motion with their arm. So yes, it's not always like strap them down, you know, and that's the best solution.
I think it's so important to mention though, because I think people think, well, to get head control, I have to make sure that they've got supports here, and I think they need to be back. Like, we think that increases their access, and in fact it can detract from it. And it's like you mentioned earlier, it's all about an individualized approach, but making sure we're tapping into our PTs and our OTs and
absolutely
seeing what that looks like for each individual student.
Yep.
So what other considerations should we put in place for optimal learning and positioning, especially with all the equipment these kiddos have, chairs, standers, gait trainers? What do we even need to be looking for?
Well, some of the things I kind of hit on, you know, when we talked about why we even want to care about positioning, but, you know, just another thing that I haven't mentioned yet is, you know, when we talk, I know I talked about the position of the pelvis and making sure it's in a good stabilized position, but that also not only just for that proximal stabilization, but also just for overall alignment. If they're sitting, you know, very crooked in their chair, it's going to immediately impact the alignment of their spine, which is going to impact the alignment of their head. So just taking all of that into consideration, that's all connected, you know, and a lot of it starts from the bottom up. So, you know, I think sometimes one of the things that people try to do immediately when they see a student with their head down is just to correct the head and try to, find a way to do that, when really it might need to start from the bottom and correcting their overall trunk position or their pelvic position, which will in turn help with their head stability. The other thing with head support is a lot of times students may have a tray that goes on their chair, and just having that extra support under their arms can give them something to kind of stabilize with their arms to help with their head control. So asking a student to use their head to access a device might be very challenging if they don't have that support that they need under their arms. Another thing that I've seen too, with speaking of head control, is some of my students who have had maybe poor habits over long periods of time, and it's led to changes in their range of motion and their alignment in their neck. They look really uncomfortable maybe in the way that they're sitting, but that's what they're used to. And, trying to change that on a dime is going to be really hard. And sometimes we just have to accept things that maybe don't look pretty, but might be functional for them. It's just about getting down to assessing and understanding, how they are presenting to us.
So you mentioned assessing. If somebody was looking at access and they felt like they were running into some roadblocks, what's the best way to assess somebody with positioning challenges or the supports in place?
I think the best way is to get them out of whatever piece of equipment they're generally in, have them on, an open mat table if possible, or even on the floor, and just kind of working with them on just observing, maybe incorporating some really preferred activities, see how they interact with those activities, watching for any of the smallest movements that they can provide to indicate that they're enjoying it or they're not enjoying it, and then build upon those.
Yeah, I think that's great. There's some really powerful videos. I know Karen Kangas does it, and ASL has some really great courses where you can really see the power of when you get them out of the chair and just how their body shifts. And in most cases, they become more attentive because they're able to kind of relax. And we know the power of being able to relax too is really powerful when it comes to access. Because if your tone's always increased, if you're always tense, it does make an impact in your ability to learn and your access to things in your environment.
And I think the PT can really help with that, because there's only so much a chair can do. It's not a magical fix. And so if you have those extra hands and supports from your therapists, they can help mold and move the student into better positions.
And I'm smiling because you just hit on something. You're like, the chair isn't the fix. We hear all the time, the device, why can't they use the device? And I'm like, the device isn't the fix. We as communication partners and therapists have to be doing the right supports. So it's so funny that it crosses disciplines.
Yes, it does. I know. It's great. I love that.
So challenges, we talked about a couple already, but what challenges are you seeing with positioning? What do you wish we could change right now?
Well, I think a lot of what I talked about before was head control. And I think that's always my biggest challenge, is for those kiddos that don't have good head control. It's just a really challenging thing to fix. A lot of times they just don't like when you try to provide those external supports to give them, that assist, they don't like it. The effects of gravity are huge. Sometimes it's just a lot for them to work against gravity. Sometimes it helps just to, even when we talked about getting them out of their chair, get them into a sideline position where they don't have as much of an impact from gravity. But it's hard because a lot of times as we talked about before, when you change their position, it changes their visual field and kind of their ability to interact with the activities. So I always have seen that as a huge challenge with my kiddos, especially when they don't have good functional use of their hands or their arms, and we're relying on their head. It becomes a bigger challenge if they don't have good head control.
And you've mentioned the head a lot today, so I think it's important to note, because a lot of people, I think the go-to is their hands,
right?
Because that would be the preferred method that we all use to access things.
Right.
Why would we consider their head over their hands? What would be a rationale behind that?
Well, a lot of times kids, especially kids with cerebral palsy, they have a lot of tone that impacts their movements. And so it might take an extraordinary amount of effort or exertion on their part in order to move their hand in order to reach whatever device it is we're trying to get them to access. And not only just exertion, but accuracy. They might swing and miss, for lack of better words. They just don't have that good smooth movement, that gradation of movement. And so a lot of times it's just too much effort, too difficult on their part, when really something very easy would be to put something just beside their head and take a lot of the work out of it for them.
And I think it's important to note too, correct me if I'm wrong, but just watching my little 7-month-old, you gain control first of your head in development, correct? And then kind of the core out. Is that your interpretation, or is there more to it than that?
Sort of. I mean, I guess the one thing you're looking at when you have a newborn is, their head. They're able to hold their head up, and so it kind of does start there. Which is a little contradictory, to when we look at it in the future, when someone has poor head control, a lot of it is related to their poor trunk control as well. But yes, as far as development goes, they do start, and they learn how to move with head movements. You get them on their tummy and they start moving and turning their head, and then all of a sudden they're rolling over. And so a lot of that does play into a lot of further development.
What about, we were talking about challenges too. So what about, because one of the things that I always get is the mounting, right? So we know that these kiddos are in a lot of different pieces of equipment, and we know their visual field changes. Have you seen any issues or successes, for that matter, when it comes to making sure their mounts are in place and their communication systems travel with them to all of these pieces of equipment?
Yes, I've seen good and challenges as well. I think in terms of challenges, sometimes it could just be the bulkiness of it, especially when it comes down to attaching it for head use. Sometimes it can even impact their ability to get through doorways, if they have, something on each side in their wheelchair. But then also the other challenge I would say is just consistent placement. One person may put it here, one person may put it there, and, that's hard to make it perfect. So that would be another challenge in terms of mounting. But then, yes, again, we talked about changes in position and how important that is, but the easiest thing to mount to is a wheelchair. And so when kids become reliant on their devices and become good at using them, a lot of times it requires that they spend more time in their wheelchairs, because that's the best place to mount it and for them to have access. So I know I've worked a little bit with some devices that can have, external stands or supports that can be placed in front of the student. So I think that there are solutions to that issue. And you are a wealth of knowledge, I know, and your whole department is, that sometimes just asking, hey, how could we change this so that our student can access it in this position? I know that you jump right on it to try to figure it out.
Well, and that's the importance of light tech too, right? Light tech is so mobile, and, even when they're sidelined, you get them out of their chair, we can pull out a light tech system, whether it be picture cards or photographs or a low-tech core board, any of those things. That's the beauty of them. So I know a lot of people are like, well, we're just going to use the one system or their device, but we know that there's benefits to having the backup.
Right. Or they just go without it when they're not in that position, which is unfortunate.
Right. And we wouldn't say that we wouldn't want them to go without their wheelchair, right? Why would we want them to go without their communication system? Yeah, 100%. Any other challenges you see with positioning, or specifically to AAC or in general?
The only other thing that I can think of is, a lot of these students even have day-to-day fluctuations in their tone. So one day you might get them set up and you say, okay, this is it. We found the setup. This is perfect. They can do it. And then the next day you try it again and all of a sudden it's not working. And so I think just keeping that in the back of your mind that, they may not present the same from day to day, and just being willing to, or having alternative options, for those days and for those changes that may pop up.
That's a great point. And even, we've chatted in the past about those kiddos that go through growth spurts over the summer. And it's like,
Yes.
oh, good gravy. They just got a chair and now they've gone and shot off on a growth spurt and we have to change
Yes.
everything, change their plates, change their straps, everything.
Yes. And that affects their positioning too. If they've had a growth spurt, they may not be positioned well anymore, and their tone and everything.
Yeah. So it's a trickle effect. Everything affects everything else. I'm curious what, you said you had that classroom where the collaboration was great. Tell the listeners a little bit about some of the successes in that classroom that you saw and why it worked so well.
Well, a lot of times as a PT, I travel from building to building, and I come into my building and I see my students and I leave. And one of the things that was great about this particular classroom is I had so many students there that I was able to adjust my schedule to really be in the building for a full day, which is unheard of for a PT, and, we just did a lot of pushing into the classroom, and I did a lot of co-treating with the OT. I even co-treated with the SLP, just pushing in during classroom activities. Our case manager, the teacher of the classroom, was wonderful about carrying over a lot of our activities and ideas in therapy into the classroom setting, coming to us with ideas she even had, just being very innovative in the way that she taught and did her lessons, just to take into account these students' physical needs.
That's so important. So it goes back to the communication and collaboration piece. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Did you guys have stations set up, or was it that you just felt like you had a clear plan for each of the students? Did you have universals, or was it more individualized?
I guess a little bit of both. I think it kind of fluctuated and changed, throughout the year. There would be times where we would be working on certain things and have each student work on that. But then, a lot of times it would just be, we come in and we say, we're here. What do you need? What are your challenges? What is it that you're struggling with? Or, let us see what it is that you're doing in the classroom, and then we can help problem solve and figure out how to support that. And just, I guess, flexibility would probably be the name, that was really important. Just being able to come in and not always have a set plan, but just coming in and just seeing what was needed at that point in time.
Awesome. Any specific resources you would think that the listeners would benefit from, either from assessment or from like monitoring, or would it just be best to reach out to their PT?
I think it's always best to reach out to, both PT and OT. I know I've attended several courses that SSD has offered and brought in some, wonderful resources about assessing these students and helping these students with complex bodies access their outcome devices. Every move counts is a wonderful assessment. It's a very involved assessment. So it's something that would require a lot of planning and, knowledge from and input from the therapists. But it's a good window into the students' strengths in terms of what you could build upon for their communication.
Love it. Yes, that's a great resource. I'm so glad we hit on that. So I don't want to leave without asking you the question we ask all of our guests, which is, tell us your favorite story about someone you've worked with AAC.
Okay. So she's from that classroom that I've been talking about a lot. And it was just one of those really challenging positioning situations where she had scoliosis. She did not have good use of her arms and her hands, really poor head control. A lot of it just due to changes over time. You could almost see in her neck, the changes that had occurred from poor positioning. And she, so it's just getting her to interact and be engaged successfully was a challenge. And we found something using her head that kept her attention, and she was able to use her head to play music on a laptop, on a computer device. And, you could just see her lighting up as she was doing it and smiling and, just really getting into it. And you could just tell that she felt really proud of herself when she did that. And it was just a wonderful success to see her doing that independently.
Was she using Tar Heel gameplay, or do you remember what program she was using to access the?
It was one of those programs where the song plays and then it stops. And then you have to, and then you have to click it to get it to go again, that sort of thing. And you can adjust. It was so adjustable too. You could adjust the length of time that it stopped for and make it really tailored to her needs.
So for listeners, if you go to www.tarheel, it's TARHEEL, gameplay, GAMEPLAY.org, you'll see what Kristen's talking about. And there's so many music videos, and you can upload your own too if there's something that's a little more obscure. But I don't know why it always pops into my head every time I think of Tar Heel gameplay. I think of Taylor Swift's "Shake It Off" because I think it's one of those things that like everybody gets in a better mood. So
yes, absolutely,
I love it. I will put that in the show notes. Any other final thoughts or takeaways for our listeners?
I don't think so. I mean, I think we hit on the big points. I think just making use of your therapist. That's what we're here for. We enjoy, at least I enjoy a challenge. So, and working as a team, I think that, you can't go wrong. So.
And if anyone has any questions, what's the best way to reach you?
For me personally, probably email. I have, do you want me to?
If you could,
provide it. So, I have SSD email, which is KR Driskill, DRISKILL at ssdmo.org. And then I have Mehlville, which is Driskill K at msdr9.org.
Perfect. All right. Thank you so much for your wealth of knowledge and just being so willing to share all your experiences. I know listeners will get a ton of info from it.
I hope so. And thank you for asking me.
So since we're talking about complex bodies, we thought it'd be really helpful for a quick tip to kind of go into switches that we might use for a student with a complex body. When we're considering switches, there are two different types of switches that we want to review. We have what's called mechanical switches and electronic switches. Now, when we're looking at switch properties, there are a couple of considerations that we want to consider. Sensitivity or force that would be required, the adjustability of the switch, the surface size, the area that the switch would be, and the height of the switch. Then we also want to consider the sensory feedback that student would be receiving. So what kind of auditory or tactile feedback they're receiving, a click or a beep or no feedback at all. Those are all different switches, features that we could feature match with properties of switches. So mechanical switches are different than electronic switches in the sense that a mechanical switch requires 5 actions as well as graded force to be able to complete the required feedback loop of locating the switch, touching the switch, pressing, potentially holding the switch, and then releasing of that switch. So those are all 5 actions with graded force are required for the student to successfully access and target the switch. Electronic switches, on the other hand, only require 2 actions. So locating the switch and no force, and then releasing the switch. So when we think about optimal access for the student and what switch properties they might require or benefit from, those are some considerations. We have all different kinds of switches, and I'll link our resource list of potential switches that you can either check out from the IRC or reach out to your AAC facilitator or computer access facilitator to check out and trial. Mechanical switches, we have all different kinds. We have jelly beans, we have wobble, we have spec, we have PAL pads, all different properties and feature matches that might benefit a student with different types of graded force required, tactile feedback, and adjustability. Then we have proximity switches, which again, don't require any kind of graded force or touch pressure. You just have to get within the field of them. A few examples that we use often are AMDI and ASL, candy corn as well. So, and then this one that I have demoed is the movement sensor switch. So all different kinds. I would definitely recommend, if you have questions, to reach out to your computer access facilitator or reach out to your augmentative communication facilitator for further information and or guidance.
Today we're going to talk about switches, and we're going to talk about using switches to activate toys. But of course, I want to put our emphasis on the communication that can go along with that. So I'm going to share my screen. He's one of the Minions, and he is switch activated. He actually resides at the IRC here at SSD, and I checked him out, and I hooked up a jelly bean switch to him. And his job is to give us some interactive communication kind of things. So every time I hit the switch, so he just makes some kind of a sound of, commentary kind of a sound every time that I hit him. Let me move my microphone a little closer here. So I'm showing him on my screen, so you know that he's here. But now I'm also going to stop that, or actually I'm going to go to a new share, and I'm going to show you a Google Slides that I put together, and it's called Minnion Say What? And we're going to have Bob participate in this activity. So the slides, the Google Slides that I have, it's, again, back and forth participation. So Minnion Say What? And then the next slide is, well, now you say hi. So I've got this one is actually with lamp words for life icons, but it doesn't matter. Any you, it doesn't, that's all I'm showing. But then the GIF of somebody waving, so we can work on our gestures. Minnion Say What? And then you can say, come here. So again, doing that gesture, doing that motion. Minnion Say What? Now you can say, that's good. Minnion Say What? Oh, now you can say, that's bad. Minnion Say What? Ah. And now you can say goodbye. All right. So that's my little activity with the Minnion. And there he is. So easy back and forth, but also I'm hoping fun and engaging. So now we're going to go to another toy, and this one's called Pie Face. You might have played this at home. And I'm going to again mirror my screen and share so you can see it. And the idea here is that I have the game ready to go. And this one has been adapted to be switch activated. So you can see that it's here. It's got a switch port. I've still got my jelly bean, and it plays the same. So we've got the same vocabulary of, oh no, and watch out, and here, come now, So the spinning, the cranking of the handle, all that, but it's going to be the switch that's going to make it move. The idea is it's all loaded, everything's going, and then you spin the spinner. And if we get 5, whoa, then you're going to hit the switch, which is right here in front of it. We can maybe move it around here. You can see it here better. And every time I hit it, you can kind of hear go, there it goes. Oh, so the idea of switch activated, but all the fun, all the excitement, and all the communication that can be going on while we're putting pie in each other's face. How cool is that? Laura, that was really a good interview.
Thanks. I think that all the points Kristen made are just ones that we know, but sometimes we forget we know. And I think that when in doubt, just constantly going back to the table and the team and saying, where are we at? What's our feature matching assessment? And just the other day, I had a student where he has a high-tech system and the team was struggling with mounting. And I said, yeah, he is in a lot of pieces of equipment. Well, what do we have light tech wise that we can do when he is in this situation?
Yeah.
They're like, oh, we hadn't even thought of that. So sometimes it's the simplest things that are the easiest, and not to say we're not working on the same exact skills. We are. We're just doing it in using different pieces of technology based off of a feature match to his needs in the moment.
Yeah. I'm so glad you mentioned that, because that's where I think sometimes we get focused and on one type of thing and what's the perfect way and all, but yet we know there's so many variables, daily changes throughout, the students' physical abilities to, make some changes, but also just the day as far as where they're at, what's going on. And you're right. We need more of those quick, easy, grab a board and let's talk. Let's not miss an opportunity, but it doesn't have to be so dependent on all the physical aspects of that student. Yeah.
Yeah, and the physical aspects are important, and we know that they're ever changing. If anybody out there has figured out how to keep your kids from growing, let me know, because my kid's going to eat me out of house and home, and he's just constantly. I don't know where the time has gone, but these kids are no different, and they all have things to say. And how can we be good communication partners and take into all those considerations what positioning looks like, so that we're setting them up for success? I think those are my key takeaways from talking with Kristen is just looking to our PTs for guidance, looking to our OTs, making sure that we know that movement is important. And sometimes restricting more is not the answer. I think people think that if we just give them stability and kind of restrict them, put the chest harnesses on, put the shoulder,
all those parts of that chair that can help keep them, in a good position, right?
Yeah, I think people think the more is better. And sometimes it's actually the opposite. Sometimes we need to get them out of the chair, let their bodies relax so that they can be in a comfortable position to learn. I can't even imagine if I was sitting in the same, I'm a squirmer. So if I was sitting in the same position all day, I would not be in a good place to learn. So yeah, I think she brings up really great points. We'll have some other resources in here that you guys can look to check out for sure. Check out AAC for All as well on Instagram, as if you're looking for switch adapted ideas, because she's constantly creating some new ones. And, hope you enjoyed all these resources. Complex bodies are definitely one that we're always striving, all of us, you and I both, Cheryl, right? We're always looking for more ideas in education.
And like we were saying before, it's a constant because it's changes. It's not set in stone. So like we said, by the time we feel like we got a good grip on something, then they'll have a growth spurt and things just don't fit the same. So I want us to be I want us to have that mindset of growth. We just keep looking, we just keep trying. We just, that's the reason we do the podcast, right? We want to make sure everybody has a chance to keep that open communication going about what's out there and what they can take advantage of.
Exactly, full circle. But you know what? We haven't asked for feedback in a while. So I would also say, if you're listening and you have ideas that you feel like we haven't hit on, or if you have an idea for an episode, feel free to message us, because we're always listening and we appreciate any of your ideas and thoughts and questions that you have. So have a wonderful weekend, and we'll catch you in a couple weeks.
All right. Sounds good. Bye, guys.